Hello everyone and welcome. So today we're digging back into my Dungeons & Dragons journal and delving into a bit of narrative structure. So a couple of videos ago, I was talking about different writing techniques, such as character and story hooks. For clarity, my intro is the story hook, and the character hooks represent motivation. Another way of thinking about motivation is it being the driving force behind the decisions each character makes. However, like I say in all my videos, everything is in a draft state and subject to change. And I've changed the intro, or in this instance, story hook for scene 1. Surprise, surprise. A story or narrative hook is a sentence or paragraph that grabs the reader's attention. For argument's sake, my story hook is the intro. We all know, providing everyone has seen my previous videos, that I'm writing a game based on the time of Anne Boleyn and her untimely imprisonment. So I felt my old intro got into the story a bit too quickly, and I wanted to introduce the PCs more gently into the world so they could think more about their characters and why they are on this journey to rescue Anne Boleyn. And with this character exploration in mind, my new intro reads, our characters are meeting in a City of York tavern in Holborn. The smell of ale and stew fills the booth as their contact reveals why they've been summoned, rescuing Anne Boleyn from her imprisonment at the Tower of London. With Henry's spies everywhere, our characters only have a few moments to take this assignment, if they have a choice. Now, my old intro placed the characters directly outside the White Tower, and to be honest, made a lot of assumptions about how they got there, and completely disregarded any difficulties they may have faced along the way. To see this for yourselves, here is my old intro. The icy winds howl as our heroes clamber down the east wall. From the courtyard, rain pelts against the White Tower, and the booming curses of the yeoman guard carry over the gales. There isn't much time left to enter the tower. Gold only buys a few minutes. So if you compare them side by side, my old intro pretty much just drops them into this world. It's forcing them to think about tactics right away, rather than slowly easing them into the game and getting them to think more about their motivations and character development. My character hooks are the same as before, and to be honest, the reason I reworked the scene was to place the PCs in a tavern, where they could discuss the terms of their mission and why they'd want to rescue Anne Boleyn in the first place. Doing this gives them that grounding that will help them later in the game, especially with role-playing. Now I'm going to delve a bit deeper beyond story hooks and explain how I can apply the core assumptions in the Dungeon Master's Guide to my game, as these assumptions provide an overarching narrative, structure, or framework to support a story. Those familiar with the DM Guide may know 5 core assumptions underpin pretty much every game or campaign narrative. However, as the old saying goes, rules are made to be broken. Which they are, but it does help to know and be familiar with the rules, so you know which ones you want to break. So, core assumption 1. Gods oversee the world. So in the Dungeons & Dragons world, gods exert influence all over the world with divine magic. Each god also has a dominion. For example, there are gods of sea, gods of war, gods of love, gods of nature, life, the list goes on. In my campaign, for instance, Anne Boleyn worships the god Ogma, which I've pinched from Forgotten Realms. Now I know Ogma is a patron of bards, but as Anne Boleyn was very musical, I think this suits her very well. She played at least the lute, and maybe a few other instruments, including a violin-type instrument called a rebec, if I pronounce that right. Core assumption 2. Much of the world is untamed. Most of England at this time was what would some consider to be untamed, and there were multiple conspiracies between noble families with different interests and opinions in religion and politics. Plus, for a lot of people, a public execution was a day out. Core assumption 3. The world is ancient. Despite being the 1500s, the current culture in England had already been through several periods of growth and development. The medieval period lasted from 1066 to 1485. The Tudor period, which is what my game is set in, began in 1485 and lasted to about 1600. But if we go back to 1066, so 400 or so years ago, William the Conqueror conquered England. Before him, England wasn't really a single kingdom. In 927, there was some unity of all the regions under King Athelstan and later Canute the Great, who was Danish. When Canute died, we had Edward the Confessor, followed by Harold Godwinson. And Harold Godwinson is who William conquered and defeated at the Battle of Hastings. Core assumption 4. conflict shapes the world's history. Well, this assumption is pretty much what my entire game is based on. Powerful families are a source of conflict and want to cling on to what they think is rightfully theirs. The reason Anne Boleyn is in the Tower is because King Henry VIII wants to marry into another powerful English family. After all, the Boleyns are beginning to lose favour and influence, and the most powerful countries in Europe are turning against the king because of his marriage to Anne Boleyn. Core assumption 5. The world is magical. Or, magic is everywhere. The world is most certainly magical in my game. I was debating on removing magic to keep the game truer to history, but adding magic has given the characters new depths. I had a lot of fun choosing classes for Anne Boleyn and Thomas Cromwell, plus in my opinion, it makes the game much more fun. Now I've pretty much adhered to all 5 core assumptions, but let's say you wanted to break a rule. For example, the world is mundane and not magical. This could be a great setting for an accurate historical retelling of a famous battle or heist. Here you don't have to rely on so much magic, but put more thought into weapons and tactics. You could even focus on medicine. So instead of developing potions, you focus on pain relief and antibiotics, for example. Right, so back to my first scene. So we talked about the intro, but I haven't discussed why I chose this location. I always forgot. We've got a new scene title, which is An Offer They Can't Refuse. Now, I spent a wee while researching if there were any pubs or inns in London that date back to the time of Anne Boleyn. The only one I could find, that was in sensible distance from the Tower of London, was the City of York in Holborn. Now, after my intro, I've made a story point. So story points serve as pointers for the GM. So this one here is a nudge to get the DM to explore the PC's character hook some more by asking them why they would want to take on this mission. The DM will play a character from a secret organisation who is assisting the Boleyns. The next subheading is Get Set and Go. So this is, I suppose, the first bit of development within the scene and conflict. Here we can learn more about Henry's motive for locking Anne in the Tower, and this is played out by history rolls. The PCs also need to roll perception checks to observe for any spies, in addition to stealth checks, to ensure they are not followed or spotted when leaving the inn. To maintain the flow of the game, I've signposted the GM to clarify that the PCs will accept the mission. This is under the title, Resolving the Conflict. I've often wondered what would happen if they didn't accept the rescue mission. I mean, the scene is called An Offer They Can't Refuse, so I suppose the clue is in the name. That said, if that were to happen, what we could do is see them all arrested by the king's spies and locked in a tower with Anne. And they will have to escape together. That would be quite interesting, though quite a surprise and a lot of work for the GM. So yeah, we all know the players want to accept the mission, as this is why they're playing the game, but it's nice to confirm it nonetheless. The last subtitle in the first scene is Bridging the Next Scene. It's accompanied by a brief one-sentence summary describing what happens next and sets up scene 2. I've also included a note to the GM here on pointers for what to do if the players fail stealth checks and perception checks, and what the implications are for the rest of the game. I'm still working on a potential shadowy figure who, let's say, keeps tabs on our group, should they fail their stealth rolls. Right, that's all for this week, and I'll see you in the next one.